Workday's going to go live in a couple weeks. So after this course, I'd encourage you to get into the system and start playing around. And how many courses have you completed? It looks like most of us have completed 5 or more, which is good. So I wanted to let you know there's 3 versions of this earnings course. The first one is called Workday for Internal Service Delivery, which is the course we're going to talk about today. There's also using Workday in your earnings units and adding Workday in your earnings operation. You were slotted into this course based on how you completed the Qualtrics earnings operation survey, which is in the link to that quiz is in the chat if you want to take a look at that and refresh your memory on the questions that were asked in that survey. And also in the chat, there's for this course, if you want to take a look at that, that would be helpful too. In today's course, we're going to talk about some policy highlights that we want to make sure you're aware of. We won't get into real specific information about each policy, but we'll let you know about the 3 policies that are changing. We'll talk about how to request, edit, modify, or decommission an earnings operation. And we'll talk about how to find, create, or edit a customer. And lastly, we'll do a demo on creating an ISD, which is short for Internal Service Delivery. That is replacing the current IDB process that we utilize in PeopleSoft. So 3 policy highlights we wanted to let you know about, or policy updates that are occurring: earnings operations, accounts receivable, and incoming funds. And we'll have links to each policy dropped in the chat as we go through these. The first policy for earnings operations, this will establish a legitimate purpose under which sales and service fees can be approved. It outlines the accounting and planning requirements and centralized review that's needed to approve an earnings operation. It details the processes for establishing, managing, and closing earnings operations. And it also refers applicants to related policies and outlined in the Financial Foundational Data Model policy, or FDM for short. And the timeline for all 3 policies will be go live January 2021. Again, after this course is over, I would encourage you to read through each policy so you understand the details a little bit better. The accounts receivable policy, this will establish required language for billing invoices, which could include goods or services that are billed to individuals or entities outside of the university. And this would include a description and price, the address for payment, the amount that's due, and the payment terms will be standardized as net 30 across the university. And it also states that university records will be held if a student has not paid his or her account by the due date. Employees who have received goods or services from the university are required to make payment arrangements for any past due debt 45 days from the invoice date. And invoices that are 60 days past due will be transferred to the bursar for collection. And as you may know, the bursar is the only office that can write off debt within the university. And the bursar will also be in charge of maintaining a customer master database. And they'll also be in charge of approving new customers in Workday. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And finally, the last policy that will be updated is the deposit of incoming funds policy. This will combine the policy content from 4 current policies: cash acceptance, deposit cash and checks, unclaimed funds, and unidentified funds. Details from those 4 policies have been moved into a resource document called Requirements for Incoming Funds. And those requirements include the types and preferred method of funds accepted, the process to receive ACH and wire payments, merchant accounts, and processing cash and checks. And again, go live is January 21. Are there any questions on those policies before we move on to the next section? Again, I would read through the policies after this course is over, just so you become more familiar. In section 2, we're going to talk about how to request, edit, or close an earnings operation. If you're familiar with the current process, it's done with an Excel spreadsheet that is filled out and sent to the controller's office. That functionality will move into Workday. And most of us will not have the ability to do this, but we want to show you the process for doing that so you understand how it works. This will be something that's relegated mostly to senior finance officers within the university. But the first step, when you're in Workday in your search bar, you would type in create request. And then you would see a whole bunch of different options would come up in terms of creating a request. The two we are going to look at are editing an earnings operation or selecting a new earnings operation. So depending on which one of these two radio buttons you pick, you would be routed to a new screen. If you requested a new earnings operation, you would be routed to this screen where you would be asked to describe the request. What is the name of the earnings operation? What's the purpose? Which cost center is responsible? And there's some other questions too. These are just screenshots, but you would fill all of this out in Workday, and then it would get routed centrally for approval. And again, also, if you needed to change an existing earnings operation, you would be routed to the edit earnings operation screen. And again, you would be asked to describe the request. What is the work tag and the name of the earnings operation you want to modify? Are you trying to edit an existing operation or inactivate one? And again, what is the cost center? And again, there's additional fields down below, but and then once you fill this screen out, you would submit it and it would be routed centrally for review. Are there any questions on that process? The nice thing is this will be within Workday, so it won't be outside in some Excel spreadsheet that you may or may not have access to. In section 3, we're going to talk about how to find a customer. And then secondly, how to add, edit, or modify a customer. And when we're talking about customers, in this case, we're talking about either external organizations or individuals who are doing business with the university and who the university would be billing for goods or services. So this is different from a supplier or a vendor who are providing services to the university. This is just the opposite of that. So something that we've had confusion on that in prior courses. So I want to make sure everybody understands that, what we're talking about here today. Could you drop the link for the super login, Lee, into the chat? So if you click on the link that's in the chat for the super login, I'll do that now. Show you my screen really quick. It should take you to the super login screen. And then if you scroll down about 2/3 of the way down to this Workday tenant section, and you're going to look for OSU 10. It's called training tenant number 2, lab tenant. And this is just a training tenant that we use for the course demonstrations, but you can also use it to play around and get more familiar with the system. So I'm going to click on the OSU 10. And this will take me to my home page. There'll be a welcome message, any announcements, an inbox for things I need to work on. To get back to the home screen, you can always click on the block O, and that'll, no matter where you are in Workday, it'll take you back to the home screen. In the search bar, I'm going to type in find customer. Actually, it's going to be customers. I want this to be plural. This will really narrow down the options that are returned when I enter that information. So I'm going to click on find customers. And this will take me to the find customer screen. And as you can see, there's a few different fields here. In the first field, customers, I'm going to enter Ashtabula. And that returned 3 different customers with the word Ashtabula in the name. In this case, I'm going to pick Ashtabula County Tech and Career Center. And I just want to point out there's these other fields you can use to drill down even further if you would like to. For example, if you clicked on customer status, you could select just active customers or inactive or customers that are on hold. If you clicked on customer group, you could click on customers who are assigned to certain departments within the university. But again, if you do that, it's really going to narrow down the search results that you receive. And again, there's other fields you can use to drill down even further if you'd like to. But I'm just going to, since I was able to find the customer I was looking for, I'm just going to only fill out this first box. And then I'm going to click OK. And this will take me to the Find Customer screen, where we can start to get a little more information about the customer. You can see the customer ID number, the name, it's an active customer, it's been approved, it's a local government agency, it's in this customer group, and payment terms are net 30. If you're following along with me, you may or may not have a magnifying glass. If you do not have one, that just means your security access is not set up to do this demo. But if you feel you should have access to do this function, you can talk to your manager about changing your security access in Workday. I'm going to click on the magnifying glass to drill down even further. And again, this will just give me more information about this customer. Again, it's the customer ID number, it's approved. The total balance is the amount that's owed the university. So since we're moving to Workday, all invoices that have been created against this customer will show up in this total balance amount. And this is for all departments on campus. So just keep that in mind. And again, we have our address listed. If I click on addresses and contacts, I can get a little more information about the customer's address. Its visibility is public. The effective date is July 21st. If I click on this customer contacts subtab, I can see Lindsay Ellie is our contact person. Ideally, we would have a phone number and email address for her, and this is a training tenant, so we don't have that listed. But ideally in production, we would have that sort of information on hand. If I click on document delivery, I can see how documents are set to be routed to this customer. In this case, statements, invoices, and dunning letters are set to be delivered to the US mail. You could also have an email. If you had an email address listed, it would say email, and then have the email address listed here. If I go back up to my main tabs here, I can click on invoices and payments. And the first screen that will pop up is an aging report for all the outstanding receivables. We've been using this customer for testing, and so there's quite a few invoices created for this customer that are really, really old. Hopefully in production, this would not be the case, but if I click on the invoices subtab, This will return all invoices that have been created against this customer. And again, this is for the entire university. So as you can see, there's quite a bit here. These are the customer invoice numbers. And then you can see there's some adjusting invoices that have been created. But again, if you scroll over, you can just see more information about each invoice, like the date, the due date, the amount due, etc. If I click on recent invoice notes, you can view just notes about specific invoices that have been entered in the system. This may be helpful if you're trying to follow up on an invoice that hasn't been paid. If I click on payments, you can see any payments that have been applied. And same with deposits, any deposits that have been made. That's kind of a quick overview of the customer screen. Are there any questions on that?
No questions in the chat, John.
Okay. So now I'm going to show you, I'm going to go back to my home page. I'm going to show you what happens if you are searching for a customer and it's not listed in our database. So again, I'm going to enter find customers. And I see there's a question in the chat. This is for external. The question is, so that's for external, right? Not internal. That's correct. These are external customers outside of the university. We'll talk about internal billing in a little bit. But these are, again, these are external, either customers or individuals who the university would be billing for a good or a service. So in my search bar, I'm going to type in find customers. And I'm going to click enter. I'm going to click on my find customers link again. And I'm going to type in a customer called Strickland Propane. And click enter. And you notice it says no matches found. So I think the first thing I would do is make sure I spell the name correctly. So I'll double check that. It looks okay to me. I'm going to take out propane and just search for Strickland. Again, no matches found. Maybe I'll try propane just out of curiosity. Again, no matches found. So then this tells me the customer is not in Workday. So the next step is I need to fill out a form that will be on the bursar's website. And can you drop the link for that in the chat, Lee?
Sure, I just dropped it. We also have a question. It says, can we pin or favorite a report like this so you don't have to search every time?
And I did respond to that here. Said, yes, look at the bottom of the screen where it says filter name, right where John's cursor is at right now, flashing. So you can go ahead and name it whatever you'd like, and that will that would become one of your favorites.
Well, hey, David, let me just interject here for a second. That just saves the filter on the report, but if you want to be able to get to this report quickly, up the right-hand corner next to the bell, and John, I'm going to ask if you could, yeah, next those 4 boxes, you see those 4 squares. If you click on that, this is where you can add shortcuts. So you can add reports for shortcuts. And thanks, John. I appreciate you navigating through this. You can add reports. You can see right here, you can click on that task or report and then put find customers in there.
Okay.
And then hit OK. It'll bring up the report. You click on that little circle next to find customers and hit OK. And now when you go back up to that, those 4 squares again, you're going to see that find customer report. Does that help, Amanda? Okay, great. And also too, like David said, you know, you can also go ahead and save any filters that you're doing on reports as well.
Okay,
Another question we have is this linked to create any vendor or just earnings operations customers?
Yes, this is just earnings operations customers. The vendors would be a separate process through accounts payable.
There are help aids out on the ARC also for suppliers through supply chain links. So if you're interested in that process, you can access that job aid out in the ARC.
And Lee, do you have a link for the ARC?
Yeah, I'll drop it just a second.
Okay. When we talk about the ARC, that's the Administrative Resource Center where you can find a lot of helpful information about Workday. That's where job aids will be located. It's kind of a new website if you're not familiar with it. So I would encourage you to check that out. But I clicked on the link for the customer creation edit intake form. If you can all see my screen okay. The first field you would fill out is the customer's name. And then is the customer tax exempt or not? Is it a person or an organization? And I'll just, I'll type in my pretend company here. And I'll say they're tax exempt and it's an organization. And then you would have, oops, looks like I got an error message, but there's other questions you would need to fill out. You need to make sure you have their address, the bill to and mailing addresses, any billing contact information, like phone numbers, email addresses, that sort of thing. Again, their tax exempt status. As you work through this form, after you're done, it'll be routed to the bursar and they will respond to you within 24 hours. And you can use this form either to request a new customer to be added, or if you need to change information for a customer who's already in the system. So maybe the billing address changed, or you have a new contact person or something like that. Maybe the phone number changed. You would use this form as well. And again, the intent of this is to have, the bursar will oversee, it's a data integrity thing where we want to make sure the data and the information in Workday is accurate. So that's why the bursar is in charge of maintaining the data for the entire university. Are there any questions about this intake form for customers? I see there is a question in the chat. The question is, what if there's more than one contact for the customer? For instance, if nursing works with someone and medicine works with another. That's a good example of one we always talk about is Nationwide Children's Hospital, where multiple departments across the university work with Nationwide currently. We do have the ability to add multiple contact names or contact phone numbers or billing addresses, that sort of thing, for each department on campus.
I think we're all back now, John.
Did you have any questions, Lee, in your breakout room?
Not really.
Okay. So now we're going to talk about billing internally. And in Workday, that's called internal service delivery. Before we do that, I want to talk about a few things that are changing in Workday. As you may know, eRequest is going away. and that'll be replaced with a Workday requisition. One thing about this is that's really nice is it'll be within Workday, so it won't be a separate system like eRequest is today. When the requisition is created, this is a little different from how it works today. A purchase order will be created, and it will temporarily encumber funds for that requisition. In most cases, the Workday requisition will be used, but not all cases. We'll talk about that in a second. And as I mentioned earlier, the IDB process will now be called Internal Service Delivery, or ISD. And revenue and spend categories will create the journal entry and ledger postings. When we talked about how the Workday requisition will be used, on this slide, we can look at some different scenarios where that Workday requisition will be used. So if we see these first 4 rows here, a Workday requisition will be used to request items from stores. So if you're requesting like laboratory supplies or something like that, that would be a Workday an inventory requisition. You could also have a requisition for services. For example, if you were requesting catering for a meeting or reserving a conference room at the Blackwell or the Ohio Union, you would again do a Workday requisition. Marketplace will now be called Buckeye Buy once we move into Workday. So just keep that in mind. There will be some special requests. I won't talk about that in a lot of detail, but just keep that in mind. And then if you currently request anything from the OCAO using the ServiceNow function, that system will continue to be external, but it will be integrated into Workday for requisitions and approvals. So just keep that in mind. And then when we talk about something that won't be in Workday, an example is the ULAR e-protocol. So if you're involved with research and laboratory animals, that will continue to be an external system, and it will not be integrated into Workday. So those transactions will be handled outside of Workday. So just keep that in mind as as you're thinking about how to request things in Workday in the future. To give you a high-level overview of the internal service delivery process, as I mentioned, the first step is to create a requisition. And anybody who has Workday access can do this. And again, this replaces the eRequest system. The requisition will convert into a purchase order. And that's automatically generated based on the requisition. That purchase order will route to the department who's fulfilling the request. So that's kind of like how the eRequest gets routed today. The department will fulfill the request. And you could have some recurring services. Maybe you have a standing order for supplies from stores or something like that. So that's an option as well. After the department has fulfilled the request, that department will create an internal service delivery to charge you for that goods or service. The role to do that is called Internal Service Delivery Data Entry Specialist. So it's kind of a mouthful there, but and again, this replaces the IDB process that we currently use. Are there any questions on that process before I walk you through the demo? If not, I'll go back into Workday. And I'm back on my home screen. I'm going to click on the block O just to show you how to get back there. And I'm going to type in create internal service delivery. And then I'll click on the link for what I just typed in. And this is kind of like if you currently enter journal entries in PeopleSoft, this process will replace that process when you're creating a journal to do an IDB today. So this is our header information. And then we have line item information down below. As you can see, there's a few fields that have a red star next to those. Those are required fields. So just keep that in mind. You won't be able to complete this until you've filled out all of those fields. The first one is company. I'm just going to click in this box and I'm going to pick Ohio State University. And then internal service provider. This is the name of the department that's providing the service. And in this case, I'm going to type in seat conferences. And notice when I did that, a few fields auto-populated. So the US dollars populated, as well as the cost center, balancing unit, and fund. And this is for the revenue side. This is for the department who's providing the service. So these work tags are tied to this seat conference internal service provider name. So that's a really nice feature of Workday. It really saves a lot of data entry. In this case, this is all accurate. I don't want to change it. I could add optional work tags like a program value or a project value, but in this scenario, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave my document data as today. And in the memo field, I'm going to type a little more information. And this is mainly to provide more information to help everybody understand what this transaction's for. So I'm going to type in seat conference, or seat is selling group conference tickets. And again, this will just help both departments, the department who's charging and the department who's being charged, and it'll just help everybody understand what this transaction is all about. So I filled out everything in the header that I need to fill out. I'm going to go down to my line items field or section, and I'm going to click the plus sign here to insert a row. And you'll notice there's some of these fields also have stars next to them. Again, those are required fields. So the first one is company. Ohio State University is already defaulted in. I'm going to leave that alone. It's line item 1. And then I'm going to go over to my spend category. And I'm going to type in conference. And this returned a spend category called Education and Training Conference Registration SC 10663. So this is like our expense accounts that we currently use. And then when I selected that, the revenue category also populated. In this case, it's called Sales Income RC 1075. So I don't want to change that. I don't need to fill out the item or description fields, so I'm going to skip those. I do want to enter a quantity though, because I'm selling, in this scenario, I'm selling 10 tickets. So I'm going to enter 10. And I need to select a unit of measure, so I'm going to select each. And you can type this in or either just scroll down and pick what you need. And my ticket price is $25, so I'm going to enter 25. And then Workday calculates the extended amount. You don't need to fill out requester. You could if you wanted to. And the delivery date is, I can change this if I needed to. The memo field, again, this is a helpful field to enter more information about this transaction. I'm going to enter winter 2020 ASAT conference. And again, this is just helpful information for the end user.
And why would you choose to use memo instead of description? Like, what's the difference between those fields?
Oh, this field?
Yeah.
I don't know, David, is there a real difference between either field?
The
Or John?
description is more related to what the item is all about.
Right.
So that's how, those two items are linked there. There will be some items that you can pull in from that list, and they will also contain a description associated with them.
Actually,
But-
there
yeah.
won't be items there.
Oh, there's not going to be, Robin?
No,
Thank you.
no,
Okay.
there won't be items there.
Okay.
Maybe for a little bit more background too, this line is identical to the same, it's got the same structure as how Workday treats an invoice line. And so the additional fields make sense on an invoice because on an invoice, we print one and we don't print another one. So a little bit extra background as to why there's so many fields. And then I think this memo field might show up in the accounting posting versus the description, which will not. But we'll have to confirm that once you complete the transaction and view accounting.
Okay.
Yeah, and just some additional information. So for that first scenario, you showed John on the slide that showed the different scenarios of how the requisition will be used.
Right.
So, for example, on those that are going through any of our stores or our warehouses where inventory is involved, that memo line will be populated with the purchase order or
Okay.
the requisition, and that will be part of that integration. So like David was saying, think of the description, and you can, that's a free form field. That would be more of a descriptor of what is being sold to the department. And then if you think about the memo, that would be probably the reference back to the requisition or the purchase order that you received, showing the approval for that. You also have the ability to do attachments at the line level as well. So that might be another area where you might be attaching the approved purchase order or requisition or any additional supporting documentation.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And then lastly, I need to enter the work tags. And this is for the department I'm charging. So I need to enter their work tag information. In this case, I'm selling the tickets to engineering. So I'm gonna just type in engineering. If you know the cost center number, you can do that. You could just enter it directly too, but in this case, I'm selling to engineering tech services. So I'm gonna pick the first one. And when I do that, notice their balancing unit populated. And also the function work tag FN100 also populated. So I don't want to change either one of those. So we have the CC11783 and the balancing unit 1167 for engineering general. I do need to enter a fund that is marked with a star. In this case, engineering is using their general funds. So I'm going to type in FD100. You could also type in general fund. And again, if they had a program number or a project value, you could enter those as well. But in this scenario, I'm not going to do that. So I've got everything entered I need. If I was selling tickets to another department, I could insert another line and enter that information on a second row. But in this case, I'm only selling to one department, so I'm just going to have one line. And as Robin mentioned, attachments, we can attach supporting documentation here. So I'm satisfied I've entered everything correctly. I'm going to click submit. And then Workday, I get the green check mark, which is good. It tells me it's successful. Up above, it tells me I've submitted an ISD for C conferences for 250. I'm going to click on this little blue caret next to details and processes. And then this is just kind of a recap of what I just entered. This is the header information. And then this is the line information down below. Again, you notice it's approved. One thing I didn't mention on ISDs, since this is only 250 it does not require any additional approvals. If it was $3,000 or more, it would require additional approval layers. I can click on my process tab right here to look at the workflow. And you can see the first step was completed on this date, and there's no other steps required. So for instance, the approval by cost center manager is not required.
And if it were required, when it says approval by cost center manager, is it the cost center manager of who is charging or who is receiving? Like, is it who you're expensing to or who's getting the revenue?
Who you're expensing to.
Yikes.
We do have a question in the chat. The question is, so this is for tickets that John's department is selling to another department. That's correct. So he needs to know their cost center and balancing unit and account numbers in order to submit it. And that information should be on the requisition. But again, if you didn't have that information, you could reach out to the department for some reason.
We have another question, and let me know if I don't get it right. They sent it to me directly, and then my internet went down, so I got kicked offline and lost the question. But for adding a customer, if we go back to that process, if a unit invoices individuals and they don't really invoice the same individual multiple times, they currently use Nelnet for this process. Do they need to create a customer for every single person that they're invoicing?
If you're creating, go ahead, Robin.
Who asked the question, and if they could identify what unit they're?
Yeah, it was me, Brian Keller.
Hi, Brian.
Hello. I'm in College of Nursing.
Okay, so you're using Nelnet.
Yeah, we just moved over to Nelnet for this. It's the
Okay.
Community Health Worker Training Program.
Okay, so what the use of Nelnet is, that's more of a point of sale transaction and doesn't need to go through the invoicing process.
Lovely.
Does that make sense? Unless you're creating an invoice ahead of time and then they're just paying via credit card.
We won't need an invoice for the Nelnet one. We haven't in the past. But if someone does decide to pay with a check, we would have to move them into the invoice process. Does that mean those folks?
No, you wouldn't necessarily have to move them into the invoice process. Have you taken any additional earnings training, Brian?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so that's where if they were to pay by check, you would just use that record cash sale.
Great.
And just continue to treat that as a point of sale type transaction.
Very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so getting back to my ISD entry, this is the ISD number. It's ISD, a bunch of zeros, 196. If I click on this related actions button right next to it, and I go over to accounting and view accounting, we can actually see the debits and credits that were created by this entry. So we can see a debit and a credit to cash. So those offset. We have a debit to expense for engineering, and then a credit to revenue. In this case, it's internal revenue for EHE's Center on Education and Training for Employment. And I want to see where that memo field, if it's on that screen or not. I don't see it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It's
it's
coming
the
up on the
fourth
other
column.
expense line.
Where, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing that.
The
anywhere.
fourth column memo.
Fourth column. Oh, I see. Sorry. It's right in front of me.
So the header memo shows up on the revenue line and the line memo shows up on the expense line.
Oh, great. Okay.
Will there be an option for an Excel upload like there is today?
Yes, there will be. That's called EIB,
Okay, so it's the same as the journal entry one?
right?
It's a different
It's a
template,
different-
but it's the same process, and I
Okay.
think we'll be going through that here in a little bit.
Right.
Okay, great.
I think we're all back, John.
Okay. Were we going to go through the EIB demo now, David?
Sorry, let's do, we're going to go through the EIB upload, but just let me check to see if there were any questions that came up from the other groups. We'll do the second poll real quickly, and then we'll go into the EIB upload.
Okay.
So one thing that we discussed in our breakout room is that the requisition takes the place of an invoice for an internal service delivery. But in some instances, you might need to send out something like a quote that, you know, gives the price and what the services are being done.
We talked about the same thing in our group.
And David, can you remind us what the name of that training is for requisitions? Like, is it buying
It's
at
called-
OSU? Something
No,
like
it's
that?
called the buying experience.
Buying experience. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think now we're going to move into the EIB demo with John.
Yep. So John Orlando's going to walk through the EIB upload for internal service delivery. The template that he is going to use is already available in the ARC under templates, the earnings and customer service, or excuse me, earnings and customer accounts section. So he's going to be showing us how to use that particular spreadsheet for an upload for internal service delivery. So I'm going to throw it over to John to go through this demo.
All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you. All right. So I've logged into our training tenant here. And if you've all got the internal service delivery data entry specialist access, so if you were able to create an ISD already, you should be able to follow along as well. I'm going to go to this task. It's in my recent here. It's called launch/schedule integration. We can also just type it. I'm going to type launch. It comes up first. This is a pretty broad task. It's, you know, as the name suggests, it's used to launch and schedule integrations. So there's integrations and EIBs, you know, happening all across, you know, the different Workday components. And so even if you have access to this, you may not be able to complete all of those. There's also access by integration. So we're going to pick the import internal service delivery integration. And again, you should have access to that if you have the internal service delivery data entry specialist or role. I'll just type import internal, and that should pull it up for us. Organization is going to be the Ohio State University. So I'm just going to type univ. That'll pull it in for us. Run frequency had defaulted to run now. We'll leave that. Again, this is a broadly used task, so some people may be scheduling things, but I think it's probably most appropriate since we're going to be uploading a file fresh for this process that we'll be running it now. Just to reiterate, you know, this integration is specific to importing internal service delivery. If you wanted to import a journal entry, import customer invoices, those would have separate integrations and therefore separate EIB templates. So I know in today's world, everything is, you know, kind of done as one. It's a journal entry. With Workday, each scenario or integration in this case is, you know, specific to that type of transaction that's being entered. But of course, like I said, you can always still create journal entries. But if you specifically want to create an ISD, it has to be with this ISD integration. So we'll hit OK. And Workday is going to ask us a few more questions before it's ready to kick off. First and most important is it's going to look for an attachment. And so we're going to flip over into Excel, where I've got an XML file actually opened up here. And I specify XML because it has to be an XML file type for Workday to read it. If you were to try to convert this into an XLS and try to upload that, it won't work. So it has to be XML file type. And Excel will remind us again once we're saving. So we'll see that again, and I'll sound like a broken record again and remind you again that it should be XML. So first thing up at the top here, submit internal service delivery. Again, this template is dedicated to ISD, so you won't be able to use it for any other purpose. First, we're going to run through what the header is telling us here, what information is giving us, and then we'll start talking about the header component of the ISD and the line item component. And then finally, we're going to come back and talk about columns B and H. They tell Workday how the file is structured. So I think there's some interesting things to talk about there once we get to it. So first area, this is just differentiating for us what's the header information, columns C through G. It's a little bit darker blue here versus what's the line item information, which is columns H and I, J, all the way. I think we end up getting into double letters. So there's a lot of line item details available for you to select. Excuse me, sorry. Next row here, we've got our restrictions. For this, Workday is going to tell you for the field whether it's required or optional. We'll dive into some details on some of the fields. Some of the fields are titled optional, but we'd really like something there. Workday just doesn't require it. There's also scenarios where something's marked optional, but it can become required depending on other inputs. So we'll talk about those as well. Fourth row, format. This is how Workday is expecting to receive the information. So what format is the information provided to it? And we'll talk about that as we look through the header here. And then finally, the field. This is the field that you're filling out. It will closely resemble what's in Workday. It may not be an exact match. I'm going to go to the create internal service delivery task so you can see. We'll compare the two so we can talk about it. Especially in the line items, some of the terms are a little bit different, but you'll see they're close enough you can figure it out. But just walking through this again, column B, we're going to come back to column B and H. We'll talk about at the end. But so for the header data, you'll notice this aligns pretty closely with what we see in document information. So we were entering company, internal service provider, document date, delivery date, memo. I think the only one that's not there is currency. Currency will be defaulting based on your company and internal service provider. So that's why it's been left out. The important thing here that is going to be a little bit different is the format. So Workday is looking for reference IDs for these items. So for example, with company, you can't type the Ohio State University. Workday won't accept that. It's only going to accept this 4-digit reference ID for the Ohio State University, which happens to be UNIV. Similar concept with internal service provider ID. It's looking for this SPL number. This follows the example you saw before. So this is for seat. We can't just type seat in here. We have to give it the SPL number. There's a couple ways you can find that. One is once we enter a company here, we can search for an internal service provider in here, and then we can click on the related actions button. And you can see the internal service provider ID here. If you're having trouble there, there's also a task or a report actually called Find Internal Service Provider. We'll open that in a new tab. And this gives you kind of two ways of search. If you have an ID and you don't know who the ID relates to, you can type the ID in here. If you have a name but you don't know the ID, you can type that in here. Nothing's going to pop up. It's not going to do any search here until you hit OK. And it's just a text search. So it's just going to search for CET and all of the internal service provider names in the system. And this also is able to return multiple. So I know an example, if we type ATI, we'll get a couple results as well. In our breakout, we were looking at med before. Just one comes up. So I think it's looking for the beginning, so it's not finding med if it exists somewhere else within it. So just a note there. But back to ISD and the entry. So we've shown how to find the SPL number. Next up is document date. And if you're looking closely, you'll see that Workday has asked us for the format in year, month, day. We've given it an Excel of month, day, year. And so our format doesn't match. This is actually okay. This is, the one time we can break the rules a little bit. Once we save this file, Excel will put it in the proper format for us. So Workday will still be able to read it. As long as Excel recognizes this as a date. If you type like, I don't know, if you misspell January or December or something, and Excel doesn't recognize it as a date, you might get an error then. But as long as it's a date format, Excel knows it's a date, then you'll be good. Delivery date is optional, so I've left it blank for our scenario today. Memo is tagged as optional. Here's one of those examples of tagged as optional, but definitely recommended. I'm actually going to update our date to today, and we're going to put a new requisition number in here. We'll just add 99 at the end. This way we can identify this ISD when we upload it later. Any questions on the header or the file organization so far? All right, we're going to move into line items. I'm going to skip column H. We're going to come back and talk about it with column B. We're going to look back at our line items here as well. You'll see company defaulted. That's because I entered it above. Because it's defaulting there, it's not a field available in line item here. So first one we see, internal service delivery line. Here's our line number. Again, some of these are a little bit different, but we can kind of figure it out based on the placement. This one's got a few more words, but effectively it's the line number, and it's line number here. Catalog item, same with item. Item description is description. I think the rest of them are a lot more similar, especially all the work tags are named the same. So spend category, revenue category, you saw John fill those out before. Next, we'll move into quantity, unit of measure, unit cost, and extended amount. Those are all here. Just a reminder, only extended amount is required. So you'll see these other three are listed as optional. Here's a scenario where if you make an entry in one, it's going to require another. So if we put a quantity of 1 in here, Workday is going to throw us an error because we've put a quantity in, but we didn't put a unit of measure. So even though we put the 1 here, this doesn't change to required. The file's not that smart, but we will know that we have to put some kind of unit of measure here. If we don't, Workday will give us an error when we try to upload. So we'd put each or box or whatever is relevant for your scenario. I'm going to delete those out just for our example today. All we need is the extended amount. Moving through, here's that memo, line item memo that we were talking about before. That's what's going to show up in the journal entry on the expense line. From here on out, column S and on is all work tags. And you can see it goes pretty far. There's a lot of work tags to choose from. I know I went through those quick. We're going to come back to some of them. One thing you'll notice is scrolling through here, there aren't quite as many immediately available. That's because there was an effort to have consistency in what showed here. So any task that you're entering work tags for, you're going to see cost center, balancing unit, fund, gift, grant, program, project. They all should be in that order. And at the end, you're going to see additional work tags. And there's a lot of work tags in here. For example, 2 that we see in ours, activities and events, area, assignee, these first 3. Notice we don't have a a drop down specific for additional work tags, because this would allow you to put multiple work tags in this single box, and Excel doesn't really support that organization of data. So all of these had to be broken out. So everything that's in additional data, or sorry, additional work tag here gets its own column. But again, all of these are optional. And so it's really up to your department if you're going to be using them, or if it's necessary for you. The exception to that is balancing unit, cost center, function, and fund have to be filled out. Even though these say optional, Workday will have a validation error if these are not completed. And similar to how we found the SPL number, those you can find in here too. So cost center, let's say we're in engineering. If I spell it right, you can type in engineer and you can find, scroll through the engineering cost centers, find the right cost center. The CC number you see here is the same as what you'll type in here. Similar idea for balancing unit, function, fund. All of these will be in the name of the actual cost center, balancing unit, or fund that you're looking at. Any questions on line item? I think it's pretty straightforward. It follows very closely with what you're doing in the online entry. Next part is where this starts to differentiate itself and provide some, ease of use and options for you. So like I said before, columns B and H tell Workday the structure of the data that we're giving it. So right now, based on this spreadsheet key in column B of 1 and this row ID in column H of 1, we're telling Workday this information is a single ISD, the spreadsheet key 1, with a single line item with this row ID 1. If we were going to look at a little bit more complicated scenario, we would have, let's say, an ISD with 3 lines. So we'd carry our spreadsheet key down these next 2 lines, and then we'd give 2 more unique row IDs. So this structure here is telling Workday you have a 3-line ISD, a single ISD with 3 lines. And of course, you'd have to fill out the rest of column I on to support that. But the interesting scenario here is, let's assume that each of these lines is worth $1,500. So this total ISD is worth $4,500, and that approval routing is going to be based on the total ISD amount. So right now, this ISD is going to route. If we were to split each of those lines into their own ISD, they wouldn't route because they're under the $3,000 limit. And also, with the way the routing works, until all 3 cost centers approve, the full ISD won't post. So what we can do to make this a little bit simpler process downstream is switch this to 3 ISDs with a single line item each. And we do that by updating our spreadsheet key to give 3 unique numbers here. So now we have 1, 2, 3. If we're going to have a unique number in the spreadsheet key, we also have to give it new header information. So we'll carry our header information down. And now our row IDs also will get updated to be 1. So now we're looking at 3 ISDs with 1 line item each. And so following the previous example, if each line item is worth $1,500, all 3 of these will post immediately. They won't route for approval because they're under the $3,000 threshold. And of course, we'd have to fill out the line item information. We'd have to give a new requisition number for each of these. But hopefully that helps, because what these 3 items represent is coming into this screen 3 times. And so, now you've just copied a row down, and you haven't added that much work to be able to split all of these off onto their own individual ISDs. So I hope that helps. Are there any questions on the file? I'm going to delete these 2 rows because they're not complete. And we're going to save this file. We're going to update the date. And here's that reminder from Excel. Some features in your workbook might be lost. If you save it as XML, do you want to keep using that format? Yes, we need it to be XML, so we'll keep using that format. Now it's saved. We'll go ahead and flip over to Workday, and I think I saw chat. Okay, thanks for sharing that link, Amanda. All right, next, we're just going to upload that integration attachment that we worked on. Workday is going to give you some options to find a previously uploaded file, but since this is a brand new file we just saved, we'll be creating a new integration attachment. So we'll click that, and we'll select files, and we'll pick today's date. Hit OK. All right, so our file's uploaded successfully. Now, these next two fields work together. They're related to errors that we might encounter in the file. So first is a load error limit. And what this does is it tells Workday how many errors can it encounter before it should stop. So it was defaulted to unlimited. So that means no matter how many errors Workday sees, it will keep trying to post through the file. If it encounters an error, it won't post that individual record, but it'll just move on to the next record and keep going until it finishes the file. If we set it to one error, Workday will move through the file until it encounters an error. As soon as it sees an error, it will stop loading, and it won't even look at the next lines. It'll just stop right there. Process ends. You get whatever portion of your file was loaded before it stopped. A drawback with choosing one, or even more so if you choose any other number, is you'll end up with a file that has some things that posted, some things that didn't. You'll have to go back in and figure out what posted and what didn't, clean up what didn't post, and try to post it again. That process can be challenging. So what Workday also gives is this validate only load option. So if we check this box, what Workday will do is go through our file and tell us if there's any errors, but it won't actually post the successful records. So it'll just check for us, make sure our work is good. And then we can come back and do a load that's not a validate load. And that official load will finally post all of the lines that we want. So what we do is we set load error limit to unlimited, and we check the box for validate only load. So this way Workday will make its way through our entire file. If it finds an error, it'll tell us about the error. We can go resolve that. And so I think this gives us the opportunity to kind of have a cycle of upload a file and validate only, find the errors, resolve the errors, save a new clean file, come back, upload it as validate only again. Once you get a fully clean file, then you can finally come back and take off that checkbox for a true load that will actually post your items. So since today we got some time, we'll do a validate only load first, make sure our file looks good before we come back and do a non-validate load. Next option here, Workday gives us the choice whether we want to add our errors back to our attachment. So by default, Workday is going to give you your errors in a text file. It's going to tell you a line number, and it's going to give you the error description for what error it encountered. For the most part, those are pretty helpful in showing you where to go. It'll at least give you a hint at which field has a problem. You can take a look at it and see maybe why it's not working. What this does, if you check that box, is Workday will take your original XML file and it'll drop a comment on the first column of the row that error is in. So if there was an error in this row right here, even if it was all the way to the right in one of our line item work tags, Workday will put a comment right here and say, give us that error text description. I don't check that box because I don't find it very useful, at least not any more useful than the error text file that you get. But if you'd like to see it back in your original file, that option is available if you check the box. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and hit OK. We're gonna run a validate only load. Workday's gonna not stop at any errors, and we'll see what we get. So right now I'm just looking at status and processing time, and we can hit refresh, and Workday will give us a little status bar to show us where it is. With one line, these have been taking about 30 seconds. Okay, this one finished a little quicker, so we can see status completed. We're going to scroll down and look for another response message down here. And this one says success validation only mode, all records loaded successfully. So it says loaded successfully, but since it's validation only mode, we know that we didn't get any postings. If there was an error, Workday would tell us there were errors here, and then you'd scroll down a little bit further and there'd be an error file, just a text file you could click into. Or if you checked the box to have Workday add your errors back to your file, that file will be down here as well. All right, we're gonna go back to the launch screen again. So we know we've got a good file. Now we're gonna come back and upload it outside of validation mode, so we should actually get a posting. So I'm gonna type in our import internal service delivery integration. Organization, we're gonna be univ again. Frequency, we'll leave it run now. I've done a lot of attaching in the last one day, so I'm just going to create a new one so we don't struggle to figure out which one we're looking for. And we'll upload that same file we looked at before. We're going to leave load error limit to unlimited because we're confident our file is going to work. We're going to leave validate only load box unchecked because we're confident our file is going to work. And I'll go ahead and hit OK. And I'll just keep hitting this refresh button. One call out is don't hit the browser refresh. That might take you to a different screen. So we'll just only hit this refresh button here. All right, that one went even faster. So status completed, response message, success. You'll notice it doesn't say validate only mode. So this was a success, all records loaded successfully. We can go look up our new ISD. So I'm going to go to a new report called Find Internal Service Deliveries. We'll type in our company as that's required. And document date on or after, we'll go to today's date. So we don't have to see any others that uploaded. And I'm also going to add a created by myself. You don't have to use yourself. You could also put the internal service provider in too. So we could specify seat as well. But I'll go ahead and hit OK. And here's that unique requisition number that ends in 99, document date of today's date. So here's our ISD. We can go click the magnifying glass to take a look at it. Next to the magnifying glass, we can go to related actions, view accounting. So just like you saw with the online entry, we've now created an ISD. Any questions? Don't see anything in the chat. So thanks, John and David. I'll give it back to you guys.
Thanks, John. I appreciate that. I'm going to go, John Blust. I'm going to share my screen real quickly. I know that there's been questions about the ARC of the Administrative Resource Center. This is the homepage for the ARC. And as you can see, it's not just for Workday. There's all kinds of services that you can get supporting information and training and job aids for. But when you click on the Workday link, you're going to see choices: Workday for managers and leaders, for employees, supply chain, payroll, HR, and in our case, Workday for core users, finance. And that's where the supporting information for this course and for many of the others that you've gone through are going to reside. If I click under job aids, you can see that they're categorized and then the job aids appear underneath. for earnings and customer accounts. Many of the demos that we've gone through today are in here. Find customers, create internal service delivery. We've also got to create invoice, adjust an invoice, create a collection shell, or record a cash sale. These are demos that take place in some of the other courses as well. If I go back in, there are also the template that John used is right here, the EIB for internal service delivery. When you click on that, you can see that it's in a zip file, and that XML will appear right there. And in videos or demos, a recording of what John has gone through, the EIB upload for internal service delivery appears here. So when you click on that, you will go to a pre-recorded demo that John did during one of these sessions also. So there's a multitude of information that's out here in the ARC, and it will continue to grow as additional job aids, et cetera, are revised or added to the ARC. And I'll throw it back over to you, John, just for any final comments or the last things that we need to do.
Well, I want to thank everybody for attending today. If you have additional questions, you can contact David at herringhouse.17 or Eileen Lehman at .81. But again, thanks everybody for attending today.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John Orlando and Robin as well.